Daf Yud Tet Amud Bet. It's about 2 lines before it gets wide. Yativ Rav Chanina Rav Oishia Apitcha di Yerushalayim v'kami ba'alehu. This is based on the change in the girsa that the Rivan puts in, which means Rav Chanina Rav Oishia were sitting by the gates of Yerushalayim and they had the following question: Pshita hu b'chutz u'masau bifnim kaltu mechitzot. So it's obvious, talking about somebody who's walking to Yerushalayim, he has his load of Masechet Makkot with him. As we said, once you enter Yerushalayim, you can no longer redeem your Masechet Makkot. So they said it's obvious if he himself is outside of the walls of Yerushalayim, and his load, which is carrying in front of him, enters into the walls of Yerushalayim, kaltuhu mechitzot. Then the walls of Yerushalayim have already contained it, to the point when you can no longer redeem it. It has already come in. Question is, Hu bifnim umasau bachutz mahu? What if he's carrying his load of Masechet Makkot behind him? He enters into the boundaries of the city, Yerushalayim, but his load has not entered into the city yet. So can he redeem the Masechet Makkot at that point or not? Do we say because he's in, his load is also considered to be in, or do we say his load is still not in? So Tana lehu ha'u tzava b'de Rabbi Shimon bar ben Yochai. So that was taught to him by this elderly person named Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. The Torah says ki yirchak mimcha hamakom. When the place is far from you, that's when you can go ahead and redeem the maaser sheni. So it says the fact that it says mimcha, which is extra. The Pesukim mentioned the word mimcha before that as well. So mimcha, we make a drasha, mimula'acha, from your fullness, which means the Pasuk is trying to tell you when not just you are far from the city, mimula'acha, from whatever is contained on you as well. Not only you, but even your load. So that means your load counts as part of you, you count, and therefore if you enter, it's as if your load has also entered, if it's behind you, has entered into the city. Right? So, but if the load was in front of you, clearly the load has come in, Masechet Makkot has come in, you can no longer redeem it. If you just enter and the load is behind you, that also is considered to be as part of you, and therefore it's not redeemable anymore. Boi Rapapa. Based on this, Rapapa asked the following question: Nakat lehu bekanya mai. What if the load that you have is not on you, carrying it on your shoulder or behind you, but you actually, literally means you're carrying it with a stick. Let's say you have it in a luggage or something, and you're pulling the Masechet Makkot. So you enter into the city, whereas the load is not on you. If it was on you, from the word mimcha, becomes part of you, that's good. Right? Then it's no longer able to be redeemed. But now that it's being schlepped behind me, but I'm holding a rope or something or a rod and I'm pulling it, in that case, do we say that it's considered to be inside or not? Mm-hmm. On the one hand, it's not part of me, it's not on me. On the other hand, it's being carried through me, because dragged through me. I'm pulling it. That the Gemara says, teiku, which means we don't know. Let it stand until Yahweh comes and answers the question. Although the Gemara says teiku here, right before the next Mishnah, the Gemara does answer this question based on Ravina's answer there. All right. Amar Avasi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Maaser Sheni me'ematai chayavin alav. You ready? It's about to tell you something that is going to make your whole understanding of what we learned till now completely different. Till now we said that if you eat Maaser Sheni outside of the walls of Yerushalayim, you get Malkut, you get lashes. Comes on Rabbi Yochanan and teaches you that Maaser Sheni me'ematai chayavin alav. From when are you chayav? You get lashes for Maaser Sheni. At which point? Mishera'a penei hachoma. From the moment, literally means sees the walls, but it means from the moment enters Yerushalayim. That means before Maaser Sheni enters into Yerushalayim, you separated your Maaser Sheni, you live in Tzafon, you live in the up north, right? You separated your Maaser Sheni, you're bringing it over. Technically, you could eat it all the way. Not you can, but if you do eat it throughout, until you get to Yerushalayim, there's no Malkut. It's only when it enters into Yerushalayim, and then you take it out of Yerushalayim, then you chayav Malkut. That's when you get the lashes. But before it enters, there's no Malkut. So until now we thought if you eat Maser Sheni outside, you always get lashes. That's not true. The lashes is only once it enters and it leaves.
Robert, these
Because
are
what-
subtle.
Yes, we're going to do
Very
it.
few people can.
We're
really
learning from Psukim.
cognizant of them, so they still get malkut even if it's not so.
For Malkut is only if you're warned.
Oh,
Right?
clearly.
Somebody has to warn you. Yes, somebody has to tell you, do not do this. If you do it, you get lashes.
I'm glad I asked.
Right? Because otherwise you don't get Malkut. The person can escape his mind. He doesn't know. Right? So Tosfot points out that although you don't get Malkut, you don't get lashes for before you enters Yerushalayim for Maser Sheni, but there's still a negative commandment based on a positive commandment. The Torah says, eat it in Yerushalayim, which means outside of Yerushalayim you shouldn't eat it. So you don't get Malkut for it, but that doesn't mean it's okay to eat it. So it's not okay to eat it, but Malkut is only once it enters Yerushalayim. That means once it's ra'ui, it's befitting for you to be able to eat it in Yerushalayim. That's when if you take it out, it's a problem. But before that, problem with lashes. Before that, it's asur, but it's not. There's no malkut.
What was the makor for that?
Right here, my timer. What's the reason? The Omar Kra, because the pasuk says by Maaser Sheni Lifnei Hashem Elokecha Tochalenu. You should eat it Lifnei Hashem. Lifnei Hashem means in Yerushalayim. You have to eat the Maaser Sheni in Yerushalayim. That's one. Uchtiv, and it says also Lo tuchal, right before Lo tuchal leechol bisharecha. Do not eat it outside of Yerushalayim. So putting the two next to each other, eat it in Yerushalayim, do not eat it outside of Yerushalayim, which we learn from it. Kol hecha de karinan be lifnei Hashem elokecha. Whenever the following commandment applies, that the Torah says eat it in Yerushalayim, karinan be lo tuchal leechol bisharecha. Only in a situation where you must eat it in Yerushalayim, the following pasuk is fulfilled by eating in Yerushalayim. That's when the negative commandment of not eating it outside applies. However, and any time that the pasuk that the Torah says Lifnei Hashem Elokecha, that means before it enters Yerushalayim, lo karinan be lo tuchal leechol bisharecha, the negative commandment does not apply. The negative commandment that don't eat it outside of Yerushalayim only applies once it enters Yerushalayim. If not, it doesn't apply. That is Rabbi Yochanan's rule. Meitve. Gemara brings a question from a Braita. Rav Yossi Omer. Rav Yossi says, 3 lines in the bottom. Kohen she'alta biyado te'ena shel tevel. Let's say you have a Kohen who has in his hand a te'ena, which is a fig, which is tevel. What is tevel? Any produce, right, that the teruma and maaser, or any of the terumot and maaserot or maaser wasn't taken off, it's called tevel. There's a negative commandment, prohibition of eating something that is tevel, which means not all terumot and maaserot, not all the teruma and maaser have been taken off. The process of taking off teruma and maaser is, first you have to take off 2%, about 2%. Mido right to anything is enough, but Chachamim said average is 2% to give to the Kohen. Then another 10% has to be taken off to be given to the Levi, right? Then you have the Maaser Sheni, depending on the year. Maaser Sheni is year 1, 2, 4, 5 of the Shemitah, the 7-year cycle, which is the second that you have to take it to Yerushalayim, second 10%. Or years 3 and 6, instead of Maaser Sheni, you give Maaser Ani.
What's the logic for Levim getting 5 times more than the Kohanim?
Because Kohanim get a lot more gifts. Levim just get that.
Oh, they have other.
Kohanim have 24 gifts.
Oh.
This is just one of them. So, Maaser Ani, 10% goes to the Anim. That's year 3 and 6. Now, besides those that we mentioned, there's also Terumat Maaser. Terumat Maaser is when the Levi gets the 10%, he has to give 10% of what he got to the Kohen. So that's called terumat maaser. The teruma, which the Levi has to take off from the portion that he got and give it to the Kohen. You with me? So the Levi also is not getting the full 10%. He's giving 10% of what he got to the Kohen. So now you have a Kohen who has a te'ena, a fig, right? That is tevel, which means nothing has been taken off. He wants to eat it. Omar, he says, te'ena zu, this te'ena, this fig that I have, terumata be'ukta. He wants to designate the teruma. He says the teruma of it, the part that should go to the Kohen. Now, even though a Kohen, and only a Kohen, is allowed to eat teruma, but he cannot eat produce without taking off teruma. That means in order to make it kosher, the food, you have to designate teruma, even though you yourself, the Kohen, are the one eating the teruma. You following? No? If I'm a Kohen, right, teruma goes to who?
You.
To Kohanim, right? If I'm a Kohen, and this produce that I have in front of me, I have a fig in front of me, right? The teruma that is going to be designated and separated from this produce, which has to be done, goes to me. So do I need to designate the teruma or separate the teruma from this fig before eating it? Or since it's anyways going to go to me? See, if you're Israel, which you don't get to eat the teruma, so of course you have to take the teruma off. It's not yours. Give it to a Kohen. But if I'm a Kohen myself, do I need to designate the teruma within it? It's going to come to me anyways. I get to eat it, so why do I have to separate it? Yeah?
The fig by itself?
Part of the fig has to be designated as teruma. Right? If I'm eating this fig, if I have 100 figs, then it's very easy. Calculation, two figs go to the Kohen, 9.8, which is 10% of what's left, 9.8 go to the Levi, and then so on and so forth, right?
Right.
But if I have one fig and I want to eat it,
Right.
part of this fig is teruma. Part of it is maaser that goes to the Levi. Part of it is maaser sheni that I have to take off, or maaser ani for the poor people, depending on the year, right? I can't, as a Kohen, if I'm a Kohen, right, I can't eat. Am I allowed to eat without separating the teruma part of it? Because the teruma part of it, even if I separate it, comes right back to me. So do I need to designate, separate, call it out, this is teruma, or can I just eat without designating teruma? So the halacha is, even though it's coming to you, you still have to designate it. You still have to separate that teruma part. True that you're going to eat it, but it still has to be called out. This part is teruma, and then this part is maaser rishon, this part is maaser sheni, and then only then can you eat it. If you don't, even though it's all coming to you, you're still eating tevel, which is a problem. Right? So now,
But isn't it still a problem because part of it is supposed to go to the Levi?
so we're going to get to that.
How can he?
We didn't get that part. Well, you're right.
Okay.
Right? So Rav Yossi Omer Kohen she'alta biyado te'ena shel tevel. The Kohen has a fig that is tevel. Omar te'ena zu, and he says he wants to make it kosher to be able to eat it. So what does he say? He says te'ena zu, this fig that I have, terumata be'uksa. Uksa is the tail, the end part of the fig. He says the teruma part of it should be at the very end. Okay, he's designating the teruma part of it. Ma'aser rishon besafona. The 10% that's supposed to go to the Levi, I want it to be, he's holding, let's say, the east and the west side of the fig, for example, right? He's holding it like this. He says the very tail of the fig should be teruma. So he's designated teruma. I want the top, the northern part of it, should be Maaser Rishon. 10% on top should belong to the Levi, right? Umaaser Sheni bedaroma vehi shenat Maaser Sheni vehu b'Yerushalayim. And the Maaser Sheni, the second part of it should belong, should be in the southern part of the fig. And we're talking about during the first, second, fourth, or fifth year, which is the years of Maaser Sheni. Vehu b'Yerushalayim. And he's standing in Yerushalayim. Or Maaser Ani, Vehu b'Gvulin. Or it's during the third or the sixth year of the Shemitah cycle, and instead of designating Maaser Sheni, is designated as Maaser Ani. It could, if it's Maaser Ani, because Maaser Ani does not have to be inside the Yerushalayim eaten by the Aniyim, only the Maaser Sheni has to be inside the Yerushalayim. So when it comes to Maaser Ani, Afilu Bigvulim means even if he's standing outside, the following rules apply. So we have a Kohen who has the same Yisrael that we're discussing, standing outside of Yerushalayim. Loke Shalosh. He would get 3 sets of lashes. The implication is only if you're in Yerushalayim, there's no problem of Maaser Sheni. Maaser Sheni, which where the focus of the Gemara is right now, right? Maaser Sheni, you're supposed to eat in Yerushalayim. So therefore, if you're standing in Yerushalayim and you ate it, there's no prohibition of eating Maaser Sheni. However, if you're standing outside of Yerushalayim, that means this whole fig business that we just discussed, it's taking place outside of Yerushalayim, then you would get 3 sets of Malkut. Why? 1 for the Teruma, as a non-Kohen you're eating Teruma. 2 for Teruma Maaser, 10% of the 10% that you didn't designate. And the 3rd, you eating Maaser Sheni outside of Yerushalayim. You designated the Maaser Sheni part of from the fig, but now you're standing outside of Yerushalayim and eating it. But wait a second.
Yeah.
You don't get Malkut unless that fig had entered into Yerushalayim as a Maaser Sheni part of it and then come back out. That's what Rabbi Yochanan said. But here you see, without it even going into Yerushalayim, the implication of the Mishnah we just discussed is, but if you're standing outside with a fig, the fig never entered Yerushalayim, and you designate all these parts and you eat it, you also get Malkut for Maaser Sheni outside of Yerushalayim. But wait a second, there is no Malkut for Maaser Sheni outside of Yerushalayim unless it went in and then came back out. The Gemara asked, the Afal Gab de Loroe Penei Choma, even though, 4th line, even though it didn't enter the walls, you see that should be a problem. But you still get Malkut. Question on Rabbi Yochanan, who said the only way you get Malkut is if it enters the city and it comes back out. On that the Gemara answers, it's not a problem. The Aile, the Afke. Okay. The case is, you took it in and brought it out. That means the guy did this whole fig ceremony inside, right? Designated the Maaser Sheni inside the walls of Yerushalayim. He stepped outside, then he ate it. Okay, now you have a problem of him eating Maaser Sheni outside of the walls of Yerushalayim. Once it entered, then he left. No problem. On that, the Gemara asks, Ihachi, if that's the case, Malamemra. What are you teaching me extra that I didn't know? Everything you said, there's no novel point into this whole Braita that we brought earlier. Nothing new you're teaching me. If you would say that the new thing that this Braita is teaching me by implication is that if I'm standing outside of Yerushalayim and I do all the fig ceremony, I'm chayav 3 sets of Malkut, one of them being for eating Maaser Sheni outside of the walls of Yerushalayim, then it's a big chidush, it's a big novelty that tells me that even though Maaser Sheni didn't enter outside, you ate it outside Yerushalayim, you chayav. Unlike Rabbi Yochanan. But now that we're saying that Rabbi Yochanan is saying it's only when you enter Yerushalayim, and you're making the case of the Braita in a way that it has to enter in, and you took it out, and you said it's what novel idea are you teaching me? There's nothing new here that you're teaching me. You're teaching me that for Teruma, you get, if a non-Kohen eats Teruma, gets a Malkut. We knew that already. Nothing new, right? So there's nothing new that you're teaching me. Here the Gemara introduces a concept as follows. And we'll end with this. The Gemara says, Hacha b'ma askinan kegon da'ailuhu betivlaihu. Because savar matanot shelo hurmu kemi shohu mudamya. The Gemara says the case here is that in the tevel status, that means before anything was taken off of this fig that we're discussing, the fig had entered Yerushalayim or originated from Yerushalayim. You didn't designate any part of it as Maaser Sheni. You took it outside of Yerushalayim and then you designated it as Maaser Sheni. Right? That is good enough to make it as if the fig's Maaser Sheni was in Yerushalayim. That means if there is a moment before you even designate all the produce of it, all the terumot and maasrot, off of this produce, if it was in Yerushalayim, so that's the concept of matanot shelo hurmu, the gift that you're supposed to give Kohanim and Levim that was not taken off. Kemi shehur mudamyon. It's as if they're taken off. Once it's inside Yerushalayim, which is, in that case, you could take it off and you could designate it and eat it there. We make it, we view it, it's a Machoket Tanaim. This Rav Yossi's Tana holds, we view it as if it's already taken off, as far as what? As far as you being liable if you eat it outside of Yerushalayim. That means if the fig never entered Yerushalayim at all, and you do the whole fig ceremony that was discussed, and you eat it, you do not get Malkut for eating Maaser Sheni outside of Yerushalayim, because this fig never entered Yerushalayim. If the fig was in Yerushalayim, and you completely designated everything in Yerushalayim, and you took it out, you also get then you do get Malkut for eating it outside of Yerushalayim, but there's no novelty. It's obvious. Here we're discussing with the fig in its without taking off Teruah Maaser, before anything was taken off, entered Yerushalayim, which is Ra'ui, can be subject to Teruah and Maaser in that case and can be eaten there, but then you took it out, and then you did the whole ceremony. Even in such case, that the actual Maaser Sheni part of it was not designated in Yerushalayim, we view it as if it was, and you chayav Malkut. That is Rav Yossi's opinion. The Gemara is saying it's Rav Yossi's opinion.
Zagreb.